week at this time, none of us, we knew that the Vikings had lost to New England, but we never thought that Randy Moss was going to get cut. Now, hang with me for a second. You can say, we want an old school coach who doesn't tolerate these multi-million-dollar babies, and he looks them in the face and he does what's right for the team. You can make that case for Brad Childress. Why did so many people side with Moss?
Well, here's the thing. If the guy did one thing, it'd been okay. But look what the things the guy did. He holds his own press conference. He walks in the locker room after the game and tells Ziggy Wolf, you got the lousiest coach in the league. That caterer comes in there. He says, I wouldn't feed a dog this food.
Okay, so why are people on Moss's side more than Childress after that's all said and done?
On top of it, the worst part of one of the coaches told me, he never ran a play out in practice.
But they also told me players told me when he got there, he had kind of announced himself a leader and wanted to do a lot of talking and tell them how the game was played. And they said, great, you're a great player, let's follow. Then they go watch him practice and say, what? So, Patrick, take me back. What do you think?
I think as important as anything was when Percy Harvin said after the game in New England that we didn't make adjustments in the second half.
There's the tip-off, right?
Because Percy Harvin
would have never had that
thought. With that himself. Nope. He came up with that from his buddy Moss.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, why should have they made adjustments in the second half? They were moving the ball like crazy. And the other thing is, they don't want Randy Moss to turn Percy Harvin into a guy who only tries half the time.
Yes, that's dark.
My theory.
And he's absolutely right.
But why did all the fans side with Moss?
Because he's a Hall of Fame, he's attractive, he's exciting, and Childress looks like a librarian. And the problem that they've got is in perception. They perceive him to be no fun and boring.
Let me put it this way. If Mike Ditka would have cut Randy Moss, what would have happened?
Nothing. It would have been right.
That would have been Iron Mike?
Right.
No, it would have been completely different. Got a picture of him, the player in the Moss is Harvin in his locker.
Right.
And Patrick had, one coach told me that he's hanging around with Moss, and the next thing you know, he'll be doing everything Moss is doing. And he just is a type who could be turned around.
Well, I talked to Harvin many times about this. Moss was his idol. I mean, think about this. He was 10 years old when Moss was making all these catches. All of a sudden, the guy comes down, they're having lunch together, they're hanging out together. Randy's holding court, and that's the other thing in an NFL locker room. If you're a star, if you decide to talk, everybody's got to gather around and listen and laugh, whether it's funny or not.
I was told, Patrick, the most thing was what Patrick was saying. He's going to ruin these guys, Peterson. And Harvin, he's running around with them. He's looking for a place to stay. He's staying with them sometimes. It's unbelievable.
He's a bad egg.
Let me tell you something.
Bad egg.
Sid got along with him great. But now, Randy's down to the Vikings. Go ahead.
I had a great relationship with the guy. I go to dinner with him once in a while and stuff like that. But I have to admit, he's the dumbest SOB I've ever met in my life. I mean, how you could do all the dumb things you can do. You can interview yourself. You go to the owner and you tell him you got a lousy coach. In the dressing room, in the locker room, you condemn the food. I mean, and you did other things too. The worst thing he did, like is what Patrick said, he didn't run, he didn't hustle, he didn't do a thing.
After he wanted to be a leader.
Yeah, I play when I want to play.
Here's that quote, Sid.
Here's the real problem, I think, that doesn't ever come to the forefront, but Randy Moss is bipolar, and he needs to be medicated, but there's nobody in his closet. How am I doing?
All right, doctor. Thank you.
They need to be, maybe that's not. You think
Maybe
he's
that's
bipolar?
not a technical diagnosis. What you're saying is he's all over the map.
I've said he has oppositional defiant disorder,
That's
which
the one.
means you do the opposite of what somebody tells you to do.
Yeah, Fisher might handle him. The guy must realize that 30 clubs passed him.
No.
Don't you think?
Let me say this. When they signed him, I thought that was one of the most brilliant moves. Last year of a contract, back to Minnesota with Brett Favre, turning this thing. I didn't think they could incentivize him any more than that.
Let me say something. He's goofy, but he's not an idiot. He's 33 years old. There's a lockout coming. He knows that if he didn't get a 3-year extension this year, if he didn't get a 3-year contract this year, by the time he's trying to get a contract that will have sat out a year maybe, and he'll be 35 years old. He knew this was his last shot to get a contract. He tried to get it in New England. They thought that he'd come here and they'd maybe give it to him. I think he tried to give it the effort, but the same problem he had in New England, he had here. They weren't going to give him a new contract.
Well, they're not going to give him one.
Not going to give him one anyway. But I'm thinking he's smart enough to know that he had to try to muscle somebody into giving him one this year.
Patrick, I don't agree with you that it would be a lockout for the simple reason I was told by one of the owners that there's 22 teams of the 32 who have mortgages of over $200 million.
Let me just say something about that. Somebody told me that that's one of the reasons there's going to be a lockout. It's not the players against the owners, it's Jerry Jones and these others trying to redefine the collective bargaining agreement so they get more. So they want those guys.
And they're going to get their TV money.
That's what I'm saying.
TV money won't cover their mortgages.
But this isn't just about the players and the owners. This is about the owners versus the owners trying to recreate.
You're right.
I don't agree with that.
Come back.